My new book, The Art and Making of Fantasy Miniatures, is available now. Check out the link in the description to find out more. This is a review of Star Wars, The Illustrated Companion. I have no interest in wasting your time, so I'll say straight away, this book is pointless garbage that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. So with that being said, you don't need to watch any more of this video. Instead, invest the time perusing my Star Wars playlist, which is full of books actually worthy of your consideration. However, if you're determined to find out exactly why this book is so terrible, then let's get this over with. Essentially, this is two completely different books in one. The first half is about the story, people, and places of Attack of the Clones, and then the second half is behind-the-scenes stuff about the movie, both of which are concepts that are explored in separate, much better books. So why they need to be half-assed and stitched together here, I'm sure I don't know. And that encapsulates my overall feeling towards this book, which is, why does it exist? You know, beyond someone at Lucasfilm or wherever wondering just how much money they can milk fans for. I find that a lot of bad books actually start out as good ideas that just go awry in the execution. This book, however, is bad from its very conception. So let's break it down. The first quarter is about the characters, and 99% of the information is just stuff you already know if you've seen the movie. Of the 1% of information that doesn't come directly from the movies, half of it seems to be taken from stuff cut from the script, which you'll already have if you've got the Attack of the Clones art book, which you 100% should. And then the other half of the percent is just minor references to things like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan searching for the Sith holocron, or Jango and Zam Wesell's previous work together, or what a moisture farm is. Depending on how many other Star Wars books, comics, etc. you've read, you may know all that extra stuff already. I haven't, however, so I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy that stuff that adds extra detail beyond what's directly conveyed in the movies, but it is never anything more than an infinitesimal crumb buried under a mountain of shit. And this applies to the images as well, which utterly destroy any hope this book could possibly ever have. It's made up of 10 billion stills taken directly from the movie, with very occasional art pieces or portrait shots that have already been presented much better in other books. The second quarter of the book is about the planets, and this is actually the best part of the book, which is not saying much at all since it mostly draws from information taken directly from the movies or just describing self-evident things, while 75% of the page is taken up by stills. I mean, you can see as we're going through, the majority of the space in this whole book is taken up by worthless images. But in this part, there's at least a little more extra information and lore and a nice map of the galaxy. But again, there are already other books that do this sort of thing a million times better, e.g. the Essential Atlas or the Illustrated Universe. And so even though I actually liked the book introduced me to little tidbits I didn't know, it's just not worth it. Compare this book to the Attack of the Clones visual dictionary. Both very similar in what they're trying to achieve. The visual dictionary uses a lot of screenshots, reiterates a lot of information directly from the movies, and also has a lot of pointless, obvious information. And that's possibly because it's more aimed towards kids, but at least it has the decency to present itself infinitely better with a more clearly defined direction and using a lot more interesting images like close-up photos of props. And overall, the ratio of interesting to boring is much better because the text is just little snippets, so you don't have to wade through as much crap to find something interesting. So then we get to the last two quarters of the book where it suddenly decides to become a making-of book, which is weird when an awesome making-of book already exists for Attack of the Clones called Myth Making. And one thing I lament about every making-of book ever is the cruel reality that 200, 300 pages is never enough to adequately capture an entire production of a movie. So how good can a book be that tries to do it in 70 pages? And in fact, it's not even 70 pages, it's half that, since the last quarter of the book is just spotlights on different cast and crew. Basically just super short career biographies and soundbite type quotes. But imagine if they were using this behind the scenes section to supplement the main making of book and the art book with all new content, extra stuff they couldn't fit into those books. I have never seen something like that done before, but that would just be amazing, and I would forgive everything else that's bad about this book, but of course that's not the case. And the reason that thought came to me is because the only exception is the spread on costuming, which does have a handful of drawings that weren't featured in the art book. But because that's the only time the book does that, all it does is highlight how disappointing and ill-conceived the whole thing is. And I just can't understand how there never seems to be anyone, or at least anyone with a brain, better coordinating these sort of publishing efforts. So rather than complementing or working with the other books, this illustrated companion tries to cover the exact same ground as the myth-making book in even less pages, including some of the exact same facts and quotes. And so it's also short and shallow that it can only discuss things in the broadest possible sense, which is something I just despise, and not even close to being worth it despite the minuscule smattering of unique text and images. Which means that both the first half and the second half of this book suffer from the same problem. It's just 99% recycled content and shallow nothingness with 1% that's actually unique and good. And I know how it can be so frustrating when you're a fan to be tempted by a book just for that 1%, those tiny flecks of gold even when they are buried under mountains of bullshit, but I promise you, as a massive fan myself who is very susceptible to that temptation, this is not worth it. And so despite the very, very few images, artworks, information and quotes I haven't seen before, I'll still be getting rid of it after this, as it's not even worth the 1 centimeter of shelf space it takes up. But let's end on a productive note with some alternative recommendations. If you want to experience the story, characters, and visuals of the movie, watch the damn movie. If you want to start branching out into the expanded universe and learning about things outside of the movies, there are trillions of essential guides and encyclopedias and so forth, but I would recommend the Ultimate Visual Guide, which I've reviewed, and like with the Visual Dictionary, it's interesting to compare it to this book, because the Visual Guide is also just made up of information and images recycled from other sources, but it's drawing from hundreds of sources, comics, novels, games, unlike this illustrated companion, which takes 99% of its content from one source. This illustrated companion also stands out as being really weird because, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a Phantom Menace or Revenge of the Sith equivalent, which just seems like it confirms that this is a bad, foolish idea that they had no intention of supporting like they did with all the other series of books they released for the trilogy, which they even did for the movie scrapbooks, which are actually worse than this book, unfathomable as that may seem. And then if you want to learn more about the making of Attack of the Clones from a book that's actually good, be sure to check out the review I did on myth making.